Listen to me. Please listen. If you don't, if you won't, if you fail to understand, then the same incredible terror that's menacing me will strike at you!
The fact that Mr. Hubbard would allow not only my mother, but many others who were on that mission into time to lie blatantly to fellow crew members, new Sea Org members, young children, and let that happen, that changed my viewpoint entirely.
Your mother was in the Sea Org, and she was with L. Ron Hubbard when he did Mission into Time. Now, why don't you explain to us what you actually have the book there? I understand.
Yes, it's right here.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, just hold that up next to your face. That's great. Okay, good. So maybe you can read on the back cover or something a description of what Mission into Time is, or even better, I have an idea. Okay, so here's Mission into Time. I'm going to read this to you from this is from a review of the book that appeared on Amazon in 2009. And the
Okay.
title of this review is Better Than Indiana Jones. 5-star review, undoubtedly written by a Scientologist. And it says, this book tells the story of L. Ron Hubbard's search and discovery of locations he frequented in past lives about 2,000 years ago. As he spent time in each location, his memory became sharper and sharper, and he was able to exactly pinpoint specific buildings and structures and send his crew to find them without him personally going ashore. This is a story of adventure in 1968 and 2,000 years ago. He never repeated this activity, and it was the adventure of a lifetime for 40 crew members aboard the Avon River as it roamed the Mediterranean for 5 weeks in the spring of 1968.
Yes, that is correct. She was on the mission into time, and she is quoted in the book. But the point of my reaction to that is this. I did not find this out until, my whole life I was very proud of the fact that my mother worked with Hubbard on this mission. That became something to emulate and to look up to. However, upon getting out, my mother divulged to me that she actually lied right there on a stage on the Apollo to the entire Apollo crew at that time when they got back from the mission into time. Ron, or Hubbard, I should say, stood right next to her and the fellow crew members on that mission into time and told a blatant lie to the crew of the Apollo that yes, everything that L. Ron Hubbard said is true. We found everything there. And he clapped. When I found that out, it kind of destroyed a little bit of me or my belief. I couldn't believe it because my mother doesn't lie, but yet she felt compelled to tell a falsehood to her fellow crew members.
And they were doing this at Hubbard's behest. I mean, he had told them.
Correct. Oh, absolutely. This whole thing was set up. Let's go and tell the crew what we discovered and how right I am, only to find out that, years and years later, but I feel sorry for my mom on this degree, degree, that she felt compelled to lie.
Yeah, she thought lying was the right thing to do.
Correct.
There's a lot of that in Scientology. It's kind of a principle. The Mormons do it too. They call it lying for Jesus.
Yeah. The greatest good, right? Or whatever.
Yeah, the greatest good for the greatest number of damage. So they were basically out there finding like maybe a little piece of pottery or some little thing. And then they'd say, oh yeah, this is it. This is what Ron talked about. We found it. They knew it was BS. And then they'd go out back and tell the whole story. And
to make sure that the crew members continued on the venture of the Sea Org, when my mother joined, it was still called the Sea Project, and then it became the Sea Org officially. And she was only in for just a few months, not quite a year, before she returned to staff in Boston. But during those times, she did a lot of things that would now be considered, I guess, ancient history. The fact that Mr. Hubbard would allow not only my mother, but many others who were on that mission into time to lie blatantly to fellow crew members, new Sea Org members, young children, and let that happen, that changed my viewpoint entirely.
Right. Now, yesterday, you relayed, we sort of ended with, you were talking about a very uncomfortable thing that happened with you, where you had been assaulted at Celebrity
Yeah.
Center.
hmm
And I think, did you talk about reporting it to the LAPD?
I don't know if I spoke of that part, but I didn't at the time.
Right.
This was back in the mid 80s. But I did subsequently, about 2 years ago, did file a police report, even though I know that I don't expect any justice to occur. But I will say, here's the report that I
Okay.
filed with the Hollywood Wilcox Division
Right.
reporting the sexual assault. I have not heard back, but I definitely explained exactly what happened. And my purpose in doing the report, or even speaking up about it, was I wanted to connect the Church of Scientology to covering it up. I was told by my ethics officer not to speak to anyone, including my family, about this. Do not say a word. And also, you're in trouble. Now you have to go to work, then report back to Celebrity Center, and then go see your ethics officer and do your own conditions. But you cannot tell your father, you cannot tell your mom, you cannot tell the authorities. Nobody needs to know about this.
Right.
And that was made very, very clear.
What year did you do the briefing course?
I started in about, 1989, and I finished in 1993.
Okay, so you never saw the film, The Session.
I don't think
That's the one about the spaceman who got a session.
No, I don't think I
Yeah.
saw that
Okay.
one. I saw the older versions of everything.
Yeah, but that one
Were
never.
really
That was never made until.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I was just curious
Graduated
because.
in 1993.
Yeah, yeah. I was just curious because that particular film features a character that drugged his best friend's girlfriend.
Yes.
And
yes.
it's kind of the film that teaches Scientology auditors that they should never report crimes to the authorities. It doesn't say it explicitly, but implies it.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm curious. I didn't think to ask you this, but could you give us a statement, a comment on what you thought about the quality of those older tech films?
Well, it's funny. Being I would consider myself like a I'm born in. So I was pretty much like one of the youngest people on the briefing course, and I did my pro TRs when I was 13, then did them again, et cetera, et cetera. So in watching those films, I had the idea that, you know what, I'm in, it sounds crazy, but I'm involved in something that is so different, so radical, so cool, that the quality of the film doesn't matter. Just get the message.
Okay, so that's how you held your nose. We all held our nose in somewhere or another.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so you look at okay, good. But could you describe
It's
how
like
bad they
watching
were?
cartoons and going, well, there's something in here. There's some
Yeah.
message in here that means something. So I'm going to ignore the lack of quality because they were awful. They were awful.
Yeah.
Totally.
So moving forward with your history,
Yes, sir.
uh, that you can call me Sir Mitch. I prefer that.
I know. I'm sorry. It just
And
comes
it's
out.
okay. Just Sir Mitch is will do. Okay.
Sir Mitch. Okay, SM.
No, that's what I used to say at Gold when people would, because
Sir
you
Mitch.
know,
Oh,
no,
wow.
Jackson.
Oh, Jackson. Okay.
Yeah, Jackson Moorhead was responsible. He was in charge of my clearances and stuff
Oh,
when
my
I
God.
first went up there, and he was responsible for making sure that the crew. I didn't know this until recently,
Sir
that
Mitch.
they really towed the line around me, and they didn't ask me any personal things, no chit chat, no nothing. It was all yes, sir, yes, Mr. Brisker, and I was like, these people, and I'm like, you don't have to do that. I mean, sometimes on the set, the director is sir, but then as soon as you're off the set, everybody's first name. It's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah.
It's true.
But these guys were calling me sir on the set and off the set, and I really was so weird. I said, okay, look, it's Sir Mitch. Okay, so that's where that came from.
I
Uh,
like it. I like it, Sir Mitch.
yeah,
Go ahead.
but yeah, it was a Sea Org Gold thing. So anyway, eventually they lightened up because I realized that I'm just like a normal Joe.
You're
Uh, yeah, I'm just a snobby elitist LA normal Joe. So anyway,
typical director. I know you well.
yeah, exactly. We'll get to that story later. Julie and I, although I knew her father, we'll get to that story later. Met her at Golden Hour Productions because she came up there as a professional in the art department to actually do some work, and it's a really fascinating story.
It is.
So, yeah. So anyway,
Okay.
you're 16 years old.
Yes.
You've been to Delphi. You graduated from Delphi. You trained as an auditor. You were auditing Dianetics on grown ass adults when you were 12.
Many of them. Oh,
Then
yeah.
by the time you're 16, you've been to Celebrity Center, you're on the briefing course, you're
Hmm.
essayed, you
Hmm.
try to report it to the police, and
Hmm.
they're like, whatever, because that's the Hollywood PD. They're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
We'll just file this because it's,
No, 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 no. I
yeah,
have to back you up on that. I
yeah.
did not report anything to the police because I
Oh,
was
that's right. That was recently you did.
only 2 years ago did I
Yeah,
file any kind of
right,
report.
right,
I was told
right.
not to by my ethics officer,
Yeah.
and I believe an OSA representative visited me unbeknownst to me at the
Yeah,
time.
you just don't know
I
who,
was
yeah.
made to shut up.
I hear you. Okay, so now let's move forward. So now you're 16.
Mhm.
And you go to Flag to do some kind of work study. Now, this is I
Yeah.
don't think anybody's ever heard about this program, but I'd
I
like you
know
to
it's
talk about it.
nobody knows about it, or
Yeah,
hardly
it's
anybody.
kinda crazy.
Yeah, so uh there were renovations going on at Flag. I was living in Los Angeles at Celebrity Center as a teenager, and uh there's a group called it came out of nowhere called CIPRO, Scientology International Properties Restoration Organization. It was like a work study program.
Right.
So I traveled to Flag, I flew there and joined with CIPRO just to learn the trades. And it was a work study thing. So I would get my Hubbard Qualified Scientologist course completed if I did 3 months work with Flag and Sea Org members
Right.
and RPFers as well, and non Sea Org members. But I lived with Sea Org members at the Hacienda Gardens for 3 months. And I learned everything from framing to sheetrock to tiling to painting to electrical to plumbing. I did a little bit of everything and was
So, and how much were you being paid? You're not in the Sea Org, but how much
nothing.
are you being paid?
No, nothing.
What? Like you volunteered? It was like literally
Yeah,
0 pay?
no. It was a work
Wow.
study. My pay was the HQS course, which I did not.
I got it.
Yeah, there was no pay. No.
I got it. So everybody was either in the Sea Org or on a work study?
Mm-hmm.
Like, were there other public Scientologists on the work study?
No, but there were non-Scientologists because they didn't have the qualifications to do the construction that was
Right.
needed to renovate. So
Right.
they had a lot of non-Scientologist contractors in there. But all the people that were Scientologists were either public or RPFers.
Right. Right.
Sorry,
Right.
Rehabilitation Project Force people.
Yeah, and that would
Mhm.
be the Sea Org's kind of thought reform, punishment,
Exactly.
prison camp,
And
sort of
they
styled on a North Korean labor camp kind of idea.
exactly, and they would come in. That was my first introduction. Mind you, I was like 16, 17 years old. When I first met these people, they would come in at night because they didn't want,
Right,
meaning
right,
Scientology did not want them to interact with the general public. So this troop of like 100 people or 200 people would come in at night, and they would frame, metal framing, painting, tiling,
right,
and then disappear, and you weren't allowed to talk with them or say hello or help
right.
them. So it was a very bizarre introduction to that part of
Yeah, I'll
Scientology.
bet. So what did you observe? And you're like an outsider, but so what did you observe about the Sea Org and how they're treated? And
I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment at the Hacienda Gardens with one bathroom, and there were 12 of us in there, all females, all Sea Org except for myself. So bunk beds stacked up. I didn't I'd never lived around Sea Org members. I knew who they were and I respected them a lot at the time. But we all had to share one bathroom, and I'll never forget just memories of all the gals going crazy about being on time for post or
right,
their jobs and getting the showers organized. And I always,
right.
like, for me, it was just an odd experience to see the franticness that I did not understand.
Yeah. No,
At the
I
at the time, I thought that Scientology was something that made you more sane and
yeah.
structured, and here I am surrounded by women going insane just to get ready to get to the bus to go to work.
Yeah, because they always seem to be. I noticed this when I was invited up to Gold
Mhm.
to just meet people. I mean, it was really like a recruitment thing, but they're like, "Yeah, come on up." And like, there was a woman, she's not around anymore. I don't know if you know her. Her name was Susie Watson Taylor. She did PR for Author Services Incorporated,
I know
English.
of her name, I don't know
Yeah,
her.
yeah. She was a friend. We became friends. She was an interesting person.
Mhm.
She'd grown up in the '60s in London. We both grew up in sort of the same time, but I grew up in Laurel Canyon. She grew up in London, so we
Okay.
both had the same kind of
Vibe.
yeah. I mean, exposure. I mean, hers was the British thing, and it was
Mhm.
we were doing the same thing in LA. So we
Mhm.
always had a lot to talk about. As she drove me up to Gold, right?
Wow. Okay.
And she was panicked the entire way. And I couldn't understand it. It was a beautiful day. We were out driving out of LA. We stopped for lunch, and that was just like
And
go,
then
go,
she
go, go, go,
starts
go, go, go,
sweating
go.
bullets, right?
Oh my God. I mean, just the idea that a truck could jackknife on the Pomona freeway and she'd end up in the RPF because we were late. I mean, we made it on time with like 3 minutes to spare, but she was just like, I think I referred to it as the emotional thermostat of
Mhm.
Sea Org members is
Mhm.
constantly set on high. Like their
Totally,
emotional thermostat is just cranked all the way up.
totally.
It's traumatizing. It's just like,
I
so I basically lived with them most of 30 years. I mean, I went home to LA to see
Yes,
my wife and kids, but I
you
wasn't even, huh?
you definitely have, way more, experience than I.
I'm not trying to
No,
over, yeah.
no, no.
I'm just saying I know exactly what you're talking about.
You
I,
understand.
yeah,
Like, I
yeah,
didn't get it. I did not understand it. I thought that Scientology was gonna be like this cool thing that you learn more skills, and here I am helping. I'm rebuilding flag, I'm doing the cabanas, I'm a carpenter now, and I'm learning electrical, which I ended up doing as a career for a while. But I did not understand the panic
right.
until later.
Yeah.
Now I understand,
Yeah.
but it was panic mode
Yeah. Well,
all the time.
yeah, it's very top heavy. Like it all rolls down, the
Yep,
old saying about whatever rolls down. But
true.
they have a hierarchical management system, and basically it's based on whoever's at the top pushing pressure on the person below him, and then that person
Yes,
putting
yes.
pressure on below. Then By the
Yes.
time you get to the retail orgs on the street, that's just a pressurized system.
Very true.
But there's less pressure at the top.
All kinds of all-nighters. We pulled
Oh
all-nighters, and because
yeah,
Miscavige was going to come in for an inspection on the new office buildings on the
right.
ground level. Yeah, and I didn't even know who he was at the time. I was just a kid.
Yeah. Well, he's easy to miss. So, well, no, that's actually not true. You just look for the entourage because.
Exactly. It's like stormtroopers coming down the hallway. You just hear.
Yeah, no, you're right. They are. They just don't have the. That's exactly right. There's Dave and his, Navy Davy and his fake stormtroopers. I mean,
Like
it really is true.
stormtroopers. Yep.
Yeah, it's really crazy. Okay, cool. So I'd never heard about this program. I mean, I sort of remembered it, but then when we reunited, and you were talking to me about it, reconnected.
Mhm.
That is, I remembered Cipro, and I was like, it was bizarre because they were taking in anybody they could to do
Absolutely.
renovations on buildings. They were having public Scientologists volunteer in exchange for courses, and that's pretty crazy. So, but
Can I add to that a little bit?
please, as much as you want.
When I came back to Los Angeles after working at Flag, I worked for nearly a year on the HGB as an
Oh, you
electrician.
did?
Yes. I was a key electrician.
Wow.
Yes, I worked for nearly 11 months on the HGB, all the floors up. I did all the wiring, all the lighting. I ran a crew or 3 crews. I was senior electrician on the HGB.
Wow.
And then I moved over to Celebrity Center and did about 4 months on the renovations there with gold
Right.
leafing and electrical and
Right.
paint, you name it. So yes, I was heavily involved with that organization.
Right. Well, that is just fascinating. I mean, obviously today, with the quote unquote ideal orgs,
Yeah,
they have RPF. They still have RPF building the things at night,
I
and
know.
then they bring in a lot of private contractors, to
Mhm,
get them done,
mhm.
and an architectural firm. I want to talk about your achieving the state of clear, right? Because
Okay,
you were rather you did what's called a CCRD,
correct.
which is a
Clear
clear
certainty rundown.
right, and which is
Past life clear.
yeah. I want to talk to you about that. But yeah, so I didn't want to give it all away, but yeah, you did the CCRD at
Correct.
the age of how old were you? We 93, so
No, it's actually prior to that. I did my CCRD in about 1990, and I had to redo it because Miscavige said, "Now."
yeah, he decided. I remember I was around, hanging around. I mean, I was around him when he was talking about the past life clears and these
Yeah,
guys. He said because his thing was they've never done their grades. For
that's
you
right.
who
I
don't
never did
know, yeah, for
my.
you
I
guys,
audited
yeah,
as a briefing course graduate. I audited the grades on many
right.
people, but I never did them. I never received them.
Yeah, the bridge, it's a funny thing the way that it works, but there was a thing called a past life clear. And my understanding of past life clear, it doesn't mean, I mean, clear, there was another thing that I loved called natural clear.
Mhm,
Remember that? Which was a person who was just sort of
mhm.
naturally didn't have their own reactive mind. And these were all things that Hubbard like put
No.
his imprimatur on. I mean, he approved
Well,
all these things.
it
And then
it
Miscavige
doesn't
was like, no way, if they're past life clear, I can't sell them their grades. So he just canceled all that.
yeah. Doesn't
Yeah,
exist, doesn't can't
yeah,
happen. Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah,
I went and did my CCRD actually even prior to 1990. It must have been like 87 or 88,
right.
1988. I did that, attested, then moved on.
Attested, by the way, just so you guys know, attested means you go to an examiner and you
Mhm,
sit there and you hold the cans and the
mhm,
person looks at the needle. And if the
mhm,
needle is doing an agreeable motion, then
mhm.
then they say, would you like to attest? And of
That's right.
course you do, because that finishes off the self-hypnosis of whatever you were
Exactly
true.
right.
And then to
It
really polish it off, to make sure that it sticks, they ask you the question, would you like others to have the gains you've had? And then that completely brainwashes you into the whole
right.
the final
Say
indoctrination.
no to that. I mean, come
No,
on.
then you're just hauled off to ethics. I mean, that's a different matter.
Exactly right.
But yeah, that's the deal. So you had tested to clear. How old were you?
Um,
16?
no, it was a little bit later, maybe 17 or 18
Okay,
at the time.
not
And
much.
then I started on the St. Hill special briefing course to train
Right.
as a fully trained Class 6 auditor.
Yeah. So now at 16, you, as we say, route on, which means you sign up for a course called the St. Hill Special Briefing Course.
Yeah.
And for people who don't know, I mean, obviously all of our ex-Scientologists will know, this is a legendary course. When L. Ron Hubbard was in St. Hill, England, he was teaching auditors, and he was teaching them to be what are called Class 6 auditors.
Mhm.
And all of these hundreds of lectures we have that are used on all different training levels in Scientology, these all came from the St. Hill Special Briefing Course. Beginning of every lecture, there's a guy named Nick Kinsella, who's a staff member at Gold, and he says, "This lecture was recorded on da 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 on the St. Hill
Oh
Special
gosh,
Briefing
I
Course.
remember that.
It is 93 minutes long." I mean, it's the same guy. What we would go on location sometimes shooting, and some Scientologists would meet Nick because he was, for a while, he was our balancer, like he'd hold the boom.
Oh,
And they'd
really?
freak out, and I'd say, "Nick, say it to him. Go ahead, say it to him." And he'd say, "This lecture was recorded on," and people would go, "Oh my God, it's the guy!" So it was really
Not
funny.
him. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, but what I want to really stress to our audience is how impressive it is within the confines of the Scientology bubble that a 16-year-old who passed life clear would actually embark on this course. Uh, Hubbard referred to the students on the St. Hill Special Briefing Course as the Dukes of the Auditor Elite. I mean, this was promoted like mad.
It took over my life, even though I felt I had a full-time job as an electrician.
But you're also now working in the film business. You're working on
There we
films
go.
and commercials, right? And
Yes.
when did you start that?
Well, what happened was I was very fortunate. I was working, of course, now breaking it back, I was on the briefing course in the evenings and on the weekends to make up my course time and auditing others, meaning delivering Scientology
Right,
version of counseling, etc.,
right, right,
and studying my brain out. Um, but also, I was working as a journeyman electrician. I was working residential, and I happened upon a wonderful home in Hancock Park, which is a nice area of Los Angeles.
right.
And I rewired this entire house. It took me 8 months, and it just so happened that the owner of the home, his name is Stan, he offered me a job when it got done. He said, "When you're done rewiring my home, do you want to come work in the art department in the film biz?" I said, "Sure, that sounds like fun." And he took me under his wing with he and his wife, and they taught me everything about building sets, decorating sets, props, you name it. I learned everything from them and gained my own career in the film industry thanks to them.
When did you come to Gold? When did that happen?
Oh, that was let's see, that would have been about late 1994 or potentially early 1995. I was there twice.
You came up there and we met. I knew your father. I should mention your
Yeah,
father, Doug.
my
A
dad
really nice guy. I like Doug a lot. Unfortunately, he passed away some time ago. But
did.
I'd met Doug came up as a writer. He came up
Mhm,
to Gold
mhm.
to work with the LRH biographer. Many people know
Danny.
Mr. Danny Sherman,
Oh,
and
yes. I
yeah,
had many times
yeah,
hanging out with that guy.
yeah, they were friends. And Doug was coming up there to work with Danny, and then you came up to work with the art department. So I had some reference point because
Mhm.
you were Doug's daughter. But I
Right,
met you. We didn't interact a lot because you were there to really help the art department figure out what the
right.
hell an art department even was because they didn't necessarily know.
Yes, it just came about that I was invited. I was very involved with the volunteer ministers.
Right,
And of course, I was auditing others while I was on the briefing course. And I had just completed OT 1, 2, and 3, and 4 in the early 90s.
Right.
And so I was quote unquote eligible to go to gold.
Right.
So I had to do a separate security check,
Right.
which is like the interrogation of like
Right.
a nightmare.
Let me
But
ask you, were they interested in everybody you've ever had sex with?
oh yeah, I mean, it was gross. It was like, what? Why do you need to know this?
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. But I felt compelled to answer the questions.
Yeah, well, you thought that you were being asked that by people who had your best interest,
Yeah, of course, of
so
course.
that
I
wasn't
thought,
like you
well,
were.
it doesn't matter what I did or who I
Yeah.
was with or anything, because the goal is to get to gold and help. That's it. And so I did that, and I got clearance to go to gold, and I went
Right.
up there. I drove up there myself and met with the art department. I got a tour of their props area. I just remember getting toured around, and there was a weird moment. Um, and again, you have to realize I'm a public person. I'm not a Sea Org member. I'm
Right.
not, but I am a devoted believer Scientologist.
Right.
I'm allowed to know where this is. That was huge. And I never breathed a word about it to anyone.
Right.
Anyone. But I will say that there was a very weird situation that occurred when I was touring. I think it would be like the um, props or set design fabrication area, like a warehouse. And I was just getting a tour around, and they're pointing out things. Okay, here's so and so here. Hi, hi, hi. And then all of a sudden, everything went quiet, like silent, in this big workshop. And then I heard the footsteps, the stormtroopers. And in the middle of the stormtroopers was Mr. Miscavige, walking through, doing a tour and trying to figure out what's going on. And he looked and took notice of me and said, "Who the hell is she and why is she here?"